We welcome all of you to the Pentagon today. In lines with the now well-established procedures of the Pentagon, stressing economy, efficiency, and austerity, we are going to swear in not one but three members of the Joint Chiefs today. They will together form the Pentagon's most prestigious carpool. By order of the Federal Energy Office, there will be reserved one spot for an automobile, which can be filled as late as 8:15 in the morning, provided that the car is no larger than a Volkswagen. The men that we honor today have much in common. They have all had distinguished military careers. They are distinguished strategists. They tend to follow a low-key approach, and they all currently have housing problems. They are also all qualified and rated flyers, referred to as pilots in the Air Force and as Airedales in the Navy. They have some differences. One wears navy blue, one wears Air Force blue, and one today starts wearing purple, if I may say so without fear of being misunderstood, royal purple. There are other differences that we will leave to General Brown to sort out on occasion downstairs in the tank. Today, as we swear in a new chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a new Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and a new Chief of Naval Operations, we want to start them off on the right foot, and so we are going to let them, at least today, have their cake and eat it too. Today, George Brown becomes the 8th chairman of the Joint Chiefs, filling a unique position as the nation's senior military officer with authority that is as much personal as it is military. He has been spoken of as a man of absolute integrity, of great common sense, and the ability to go to the heart of a problem. It was 11 months ago that I had the pleasure of swearing George Brown in as Chief of the Air Staff. That was on August the 1st. In 1 month's time, we will be celebrating, if that is the appropriate word, the 60th anniversary of the start of World War I. We will also be cognizant that that will be the 31st anniversary of the raid on Ploiești in Romania, in which then Major Brown, after his commander's plane had been lost, led back to Benghazi the remnants of the B-24 force that had struck at Ploiești. For that service, he was awarded at that time the Distinguished Service Cross. There were more risky periods in his tenure. He served as military assistant to the Secretary of Defense, Bob McNamara, and yet his Air Force career has survived that experience. He has, as we all know, performed admirably as Commander of the Air Force Systems Command and as Chief of Staff of the Air Force. He's a West Point graduate. Both his father and his wife's father were Army cavalrymen who were classmates at West Point. The laurel wreath on the JCS badge is symbolic of achievement, courage, and victory. In George Brown, we have seen, and we expect to continue to see, all three. Marty, would you administer the oath?
I, George Scratchley Brown, do solemnly swear
I, George Scratchley Brown, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
of the office of Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Thank you. Mr. Secretary, members of my family, friends, I'm honored and deeply indebted first to my family who has followed the dictates of my service to this country and adjusted their lives to accommodate to every demand that service has made. I'm mindful of the responsibilities I face and the tremendous footsteps in which I follow. And I will tell you, Mr. Secretary, and everyone, that I subscribe wholeheartedly to the democratic principle of control of the military service by the civil element of the government. I look forward to the continued association in the department, and since the Secretary has set a note of humor, I hope that I hold this job a little longer than the last one. Thank you.
Davy Jones has a hobby that has been of intense interest to him during his entire career and that has greatly affected his work. That hobby is the United States Air Force. He is known as a strategist who believes quite deeply that discipline and human relations are inseparable for effective command. He comes originally from South Dakota, and he varied that environment somewhat by moving to North Dakota for his education. Since that time, he has traveled more widely. A broadly diversified military career. He started in B-17s, strategic bombardment, and has gone over to tactical fighter operations. He served in both staff jobs as well as operational commands. He had served in Southeast Asia and extensively in Europe. He takes a serious approach to everything, even his early morning jogging. He has been a breath of life, I think, in Europe. I think that all would subscribe to that view. He has worked in a way that has made NATO a far more effective organization in a military sense than it had been prior to his arrival in Europe. That organization is beginning to close more fully to its military potential, and to a large extent, the improvements are due to Dave Jones. I think that NATO, which have been started by Dave, are likely to continue, so that ultimately the NATO military organization, including the contribution made by our allies, will approach the levels demanded by the Congress of the United States. Okay, Marty, would you administer the oath of office?
Raise your right hand, left hand on the Bible. I, David Charles Jones, do solemnly swear
I, David Charles Jones, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
from all enemies, foreign and domestic,
from all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the
that
same,
I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force.
of the office of the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. Mr. Secretary, distinguished guests, my family, and many old friends, I'd like to say the same thing George Brown did about the family. I think in the military service that a great deal of success that someone achieves is a result of the love and dedication of the family. And I'm glad that so many of the Jones clan can be here from around the United States. I am deeply appreciative of the fact that the President has nominated me to be Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, and I accept this job with all humility. I'm following in some very large shoes, General George Brown. He's done a magnificent job, Chief of Staff, his last 11 months, and I just try to keep the impetus that he has established. In my judgment, we have a great service. We have an Air Force second to none. And I'm talking about any Air Force in the world, including the Soviet Air Force. And I will dedicate my energies, and I say this to my friends in Congress, to do the best I can to expend the resources that you appropriate in the most efficient and effective manner that I can. I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues in the Joint Chiefs of Staff and with your staff, Mr. Secretary, and the staff of the Secretary of the Air Force. And again, thank you very much for this honor.
Jim Holloway comes from a Navy town. He comes from a Navy family, and he married an admiral's daughter. In the face of these severe handicaps, he has managed to fashion a distinguished Navy career. He is the first Chief of Naval Operations to have commanded a nuclear-powered ship. He is both a thinker and a dreamer. I say that he is a dreamer because he recently gave a press conference in which he indicated that he would like to limit his appointments to a maximum of 3 per day. When you've learned how to do that, Jim, would you pass on the information to the rest of us? He is a graduate of the Naval Academy, served in World War II on destroyers in both the Atlantic and the Pacific theaters. He served 2 combat tours in Korea. He shares, I believe, the same serious approach to matters military as do Generals Brown and Jones. He has not as yet granted any interviews. We do not know the answer to the question everyone, or almost everyone, is asking: what are the H-grams going to be and when do they start? But we do know that he believes in the Navy and its people. It was said of Charles II's Navy, there were seamen in the Navy and there were gentlemen in the Navy. that the seamen were not gentlemen and the gentlemen were not seamen. Jim Holloway is both a seaman and a gentleman. Marty, would you administer the oath?
I, James Lemuel Holloway III, do solemnly swear
I, James Lemuel Holloway III, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of Chief of Naval Operations, United States Navy.
of the office of the Chief of Naval Operations of the United States Navy. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Secretary Schlesinger, Secretary Middendorf, distinguished guests, friends, particularly my handicap over there. I'm sure you can all imagine my very intense feeling of pride at this moment as I'm sworn in as the Chief of Naval Operations, the uniformed head of the United States Navy. But I have to be quick to add that any personal feelings of satisfaction or pride that I may have because of this confidence placed in me is tempered by two things. And that's the realization of the awesome responsibilities of any chief of service, and also recognition of the fact that I, like General Jones, will be following in giant footsteps. And in my case, they are those of Admiral Bud Zumwalt, who certainly must be counted among the most competent and the most capable of our distinguished roster of Chiefs of Naval Operation. I recognize that I haven't held any press conferences, and I may not have made any announcements of what I intend to do. In fact, I have always held it to be unseemly for an officer newly reporting on the scene to make a catalog of promises of what he is going to accomplish or what he thinks he's going to be accomplished. In the Navy, we have an expression: the officer of the deck does not change the set of the sails for the first quarter of his watch. That's what I intend to do. But I can make you one promise, and that is that I will do everything within my power to carry out those very simple obligations which I undertook when I took the oath of office. Thank you, sir.
Your colleague and our friend, General Abrams, is doing fine. He is sorry that he cannot be here today, but he sends his best, and he wanted to pass on his congratulations to each of you. Perhaps when you are downstairs and you meet in your special room, you will all remember that only one of you was a tank commander. Gentlemen, this is and should be a joyous occasion for the Department of Defense, for all of your associates in this building and throughout the world. I need not tell you, but perhaps I should, the pride that we feel in the three of you, in the responsibilities that you are taking on. We are proud of the institutions that you have now come to lead and to serve. Institutions must, of course, adapt, and it will be your solemn responsibility to bring about the adaptation of these proud institutions that you will lead. It is also your high obligation to preserve for the future this nation and the institutions and the social attitudes it represents. I congratulate you. We all join together in congratulating the three of you and expressing our pride in having you with us and in your accomplishments, both past and future. I'm sure that you would all want to join with me in paying best wishes to our honorees today, but first I should mention that we have with us Admiral Mora, who this morning would have completed his 320th meeting of the Armed Forces Policy Council had he attended. We missed you. That falls under the heading, I believe, of Herculean labors, Tom. We have Senator Symington, whom we refer to as Secretary Symington, around this building. We have Senator Cannon with us, Representative Wagner, and I believe somewhere back there in the background we have Secretary Zuckett. Is he still here? There you are, Gene. And a whole host of other distinguished guests. But I thought that perhaps it might be appropriate, Bill, if you wanted to say a few words.
No, I really don't, Jim. I think you said everything extremely well.
Then, gentlemen, this has been a joyous occasion for us. As joyous occasions will be, it has been marked with a certain humor, but that should not detract from the seriousness of the occasion and the seriousness of the vast responsibilities which you inherit. Congratulations.
Good job there.